Hey guys, Kelli Stewart here. I'm going to share a few more thoughts. If I can get my camera set up properly. We'll see if it'll hold. Just driving home from Ryan's denial of being granted pre-sentencing release, and I wanted to share a few thoughts. Now, I would have said a couple years ago that our government is not committing conspiracies against the American people. But as most of you know, I've had a serious wake-up call in the last 2 years to the capabilities of our government. And I'm going to actually get my phone plugged in here. Sorry, hang on guys. I'm going to plug in my phone. I'm not very prepared for this, but I just had some thoughts I had to share. Okay, so I'm thinking about Ryan being denied pretrial release, and I'm frustrated that he was denied, and I just had these thoughts, so I'm going to share them. So these thoughts are my own opinions. They don't represent any attorneys, they don't represent any defendants. These are just my observations and things that I think that potentially was a conspiracy that was going on in Nevada after Ryan was originally released, after the charges were dismissed. So something the judge said, you know, as you're traveling home, I'm kind of thinking through the statements the judge made, how absolutely insane it was that she denied him today on the reasons that she denied him, because the attorney gave her every proof that Ryan was not a threat, a risk, or a flight risk or a threat to the public. And I was thinking about a statement she made. So the attorney brought up the fact that when the charges were dismissed in Nevada, he knew that he'd have to surrender immediately to the court, which he completely did. And then he was granted release. And so he went back to the house that he was allowed to stay at, and they were trying to figure out how they were going to get him home. So this is just going to be my thoughts that I had. She stated to the court today, after the attorney argued that he was released, he knew that he was going to have to come back to Oregon, and he got himself here on his own and surrendered himself to the marshals. So isn't that proof that he's not a flight risk? And the judge said, I'm not going to give him credit for turning himself in, because I didn't release him in Nevada because I thought he wasn't a threat to the public or a flight risk. I released him because it was the best interest of the court, because the U.S. Marshals didn't have any way to get him back here to Oregon for at least a couple weeks, and I wanted him here immediately. So she said, on top of that, they were going to have to arrange for a private transportation with just Ryan and the U.S. Marshals from Nevada to Oregon if they didn't want to wait a couple weeks, and her biggest goal was to get him back to Oregon quickly. So she said she released him because it was in the best financial interest of the courts, because it was going to be an undue financial cost, financial whatever. It was going to be undue pressure on the courts in Nevada to have him privately transferred back instead of making him wait a couple weeks. So she went ahead and released him for that couple days while they were trying to figure out how he'd get back to Oregon. Okay, so they released him. I don't even remember how many days it was now, because everything kind of is blurring together. I think that the dismissal happened on a Tuesday, and I want to say, or maybe it was on a Monday, the dismissal happened, and that he had to be back in Portland on that Friday. So he was out for a couple days before he ended up getting back to Portland. Now, we've been told from very reliable sources that that it's been an intentional plan to try to agitate some of these prisoners around the Bundys right after the dismissal, while the media was hot and while everybody was watching them. So Judge Brown denied Ryan Payne's release today, stating that she had no guarantee he wouldn't be influenced by other people, and yet she released him in Nevada, stating that it was because it would be a financial burden on the marshals to transfer him any other way. She released him in Nevada when Hammond was still in Nevada. Cliven had been released. Ryan Bundy was released. All the supporters were in town. And she let him out for 3 days and let him get back to Portland on his own. I don't believe that had anything to do with caring about putting unnecessary financial burdens on the U.S. Marshals to get him transferred back and forth. Because we've watched for the last 2 years them be absolutely reckless with the public's money and show absolutely no regard for what they're spending on these trials. And now all of a sudden, the judge is going to release Ryan in Nevada with all the Bundys out, all the supporters present, after she was just so pissed off that he went and gave Carol Bundy a hug, and yet now she's going to release him and have him get back to Portland on his own. So I was thinking through how weird everything was. So they wanted him to get back to Portland, and they wanted it to be quick. His first request is that I transport him back so that he wouldn't have to go on a plane and deal with all the molesting and everything that goes on. And so pretrial services calls me and they say, what would it take? Would you cancel your flight? Would you drive him back home? And I'm like, yes, absolutely, we'll do it. To surrender him to the marshals. And so everything seems fine, and they're going to do a background check, and it's no big deal. And I have no criminal record. And then I get a call, and they say, you mentioned you had your children with you. And I said, yeah, of course I do have my children with me. And she says, the judge isn't going to want him to travel back with children. Okay, why does she care who's in my vehicle? My children think the world of Ryan Payne. Why can my children not be in the car? And they said, well, they're going to put a restriction on you for the time that it can take you to get home. And so you're going to have to drive like 16 hours straight through. You're going to have to take a specific route. You won't be able to stop other than for gas and food at like predetermined locations. And I said, that's fine. We'll do all of that. No, the judge doesn't like that the kids are in the car. So as I'm driving home today, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the conspiracy that went on when they ambushed Lavoie and all the guys, and I don't think anything like that to that extreme extent was happening. However, I would not put it past the courts to have had something planned, because John had not turned himself in yet. Dwayne was heading to California, and I would not put it past them to have released Ryan Payne in Nevada specifically to give him an opportunity to participate in something that would be that would tarnish what just happened in Nevada. Why were they so concerned about my kids being in the car? Why is that a big deal that we couldn't travel with my kids in the car? Unless they were going to be inciting something and trying to get Ryan to participate in something, and I would have thrown some type of a monkey wrench in that situation because I would have been there with my kids. If they weren't afraid of, they're afraid of him doing something now and being influenced by people, but they weren't afraid a month ago of him being influenced when everybody was celebrating, and it just won this victory and was in fact there in Nevada where the Bunkerville stand-up occurred, and yet Judge Brown said, go ahead and release him. We don't want to put the financial pressure on the marshals. I mean, this is a couple $100 million case already, and they don't want to put the financial pressure on the marshals to get him transferred back here. If he's such a threat and she's afraid of him being influenced by people, why did she release him in Nevada with the Bundys? And why did this intel come in from us, from other people to us, saying that there are already agitators and informants amongst us that are trying to capitalize on the media attention that's going on and instigate something to happen? The whole thing doesn't make any sense. We could have transferred him back here and he would have surrendered himself just fine. But if they knew they were going to be introducing something or somebody to encourage Ryan to do something, then I would have put a huge wrench in their public opinion side. Because if they had gotten him or even made him appear that he was going to do something, and now you have a woman and children present, all of a sudden they're not going to be able to gain the same credibility with me as an eyewitness to anything that's happening. So I'm just thinking through it as I'm driving home. I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense that she released him in Nevada in the most toxic place she could have released him by the court standards, with all these Bundy supporters around, full of all their false rhetoric and their lies that she says, and yet he cannot be released now to Portland. We had multiple homes that had been approved and opened up that he could have been released to. Sentencing is in 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks. It's not like it's that far out. They were pushing to have him stay here versus going back to Montana. So it just really doesn't make sense that she's going to hold him in custody when she let him into Nevada. I think something bigger was going on. And I think that she was hoping, and the courts and the elite above her head were hoping that by releasing him in Nevada, they would have all engaged in some type of a illegal or unlawful constitutionally protected activity and proven the courts right that they really were a threat and a danger. And I think having, to a certain extent, having people like me and multiple others, all the homes that were opened up for him, people who don't have criminal records and, you know, pay their bills, pay their taxes, have no conflicts going on with any authorities. I think that we really throw a monkey wrench in their little conspiracy. People have been talking about how potentially the government knew that the Bundys would go to defend the Hammonds, and that's why they waited as long as they did, and that possibly they were using their informants to entice something to happen. And so that kind of got my mind thinking about this whole thing today. And I just thought there was something else bigger going on when she released him in Nevada. And I don't buy her false story. You know, you can tell when the judge is really struggling with the decision. She really struggled to sentence Jake Ryan last week to a year in jail. You could tell she was trying to talk Jake out of the things he was saying so that she didn't have to give him jail time. Today, it didn't matter what the attorney said, proving that Ryan has shown full respect to the federal courts and that he has complied with everything that they have told him to do as far as all of his court dates and hearings. He's never missed an appointment or a scheduled hearing when he was out. He totally honored his curfew. He was never staying out past the 9 o'clock, all of that. Surrendered himself on his own to Oregon. Here, had full opportunities to get in trouble in Nevada. And it's like she didn't hear a word. She just wanted to reprimand him for going to the Bundy Ranch and saying hi to Carol. Even though nothing happened and he was still within Clark County and he was within his guidelines for Nevada, she said that he should have known better. He couldn't have gone there on the same day that John Ritzheimer was there because they're co-defendants. And he apologized, and he was so sincere, and he was so Ryan is a beautiful speaker, and he's very intellectual. He's very smart, and he conducted himself in a way that showed her that he really was not trying to challenge her authority when he went to see Carol in Nevada, and that he took full ownership for doing that, and he understands what her concerns would be, but that there was no harm done, and he still made it back home in time for his curfew because he was still on house arrest and was only able to leave for the daytime. And that he was truly sorry for the misunderstanding over that he was not seeking to hide anything or be deceptive, and she just dismissed everything he said. And she said Jake Ryan was influenced when he was released before his sentencing, and I'm concerned that you're going to be influenced as well. Okay, what are we, in grade school? Where you're going to say you can't play over there on that playground because you might be influenced? Is he a threat to the public, and is he a flight risk? Yes or no? And all the evidence presented stated no to both of those. And she already had her mind made up. It was very clear that he was not going to be released. the whole thing is just this stupid dog and pony show. She didn't care about the court's money today being spent on a hearing that she had already made up her mind that she was going to be dismissing his motion for release. And yet she released him in Nevada because she didn't want to make the marshals pay for an individual transfer of him to get him here immediately. There's something bigger going on. The only other people they've been this hard on in the courts have been the Bundys themselves. They're highly, highly afraid of what they trained Ryan Payne to do on foreign soil. And they know that at the end of the day, he is going to defend life and liberty and property of his fellow Americans. And that's what their concern is. They're not concerned that he's going to be a flight risk, or they're concerned, I believe, that he's going to use his voice and keep speaking up. And they're really concerned about Ryan Payne. Now, after being around him for weeks down there, and his fiance and his mother and his mother-in-law, I can tell you that I trust him around my children. My husband was looking forward to meeting him. We thought he was going to be released, and we were hoping he could come over and have dinner with our family before he headed home. Of all the people that I'm around, I don't just, welcome anybody in my home or let them be around my family. And I can tell you that Ryan Payne is an upstanding man, and that his service to his country, while he says that he did things he now realizes were not service to his country, his service to the country and him going to stand for the Hammonds and standing in Bunkerville, those behaviors weren't him being... The government says that standing up for the Bundys in Bunkerville and going to defend the Hammonds was breaking court orders. But what they trained him to do was to go into other countries and break court orders. So there's nothing when he went into other countries, and there's nothing about his time that he served that was him honoring the law of the land he was in, right? The government taught him to ignore the law of the land and do what they said. And here he was ignoring the laws, also defending life, liberty, and property, because he truly believed in both circumstances that people's lives were being put in jeopardy. And so really, if you look at his time in military, and then you look at his time serving in the military, then you look at his time serving at the Bundy Ranch and also serving down in Harney County, his goals were always the same, and that was to honor his country and defend his people. And now he's being held and detained and being seen as this violent criminal when the things he actually did were honorable. But the mainstream media and all the propaganda that's thrown out there is all full of fear and hate, so that you as Americans won't use your own brains to think. You'll think if it's law and it's a law enforcer, then they must be telling the truth. But I'm here to tell you that you're being lied to, that these are good men. These aren't just good men. These are honorable men who love their neighbors and love their country. And they're being detained because our country is being run by tyrants. A tyrant, by definition, is somebody who can do something that their fellow countrymen cannot do. Our government can kill and murder and steal. They can take people hostage. They can bribe you to get you to sign agreements so that you'll be released. They stack up everybody with felonies now because, of course, if you're a felon, you don't have the right to bear arms and you don't have the right to vote. So best way to take over a country is to remove the people's right to defend themselves and the right to vote. And that's exactly what our courts have done. People have the right, the God-given right to defend themselves, but our government doesn't see us as having a Second Amendment right. I have sat in these court hearings and listened to the court say over and over and over, armed, 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 armed. He was armed. These people were not doing anything to pose any risk to anybody else. In fact, they were there to make sure nobody else got harmed. And yet the targets that have been incarcerated have been those who were armed. So please tell me, if you have a Second Amendment right based by the government's perspective, why are the ones being arrested, most of them being the ones who were armed? Or they arrested, you know, Cliven and Dave and Hammond, even though they weren't armed, because they said that they were leading the armed men. So we've got this big problem here, and I don't know what to do about it other than to keep speaking up, because they've proven to us there's nothing we can do. If we protest them peaceably, we go to jail. If we protest them violently, we go to jail. If we speak up, they target us and have us arrested for other things. I don't know what to do. And maybe it's unfair of me to always present these things to you guys and not have answers. I don't have the answers. I'm sorry. I'm just realizing a lot of this for the first time myself. So all I have at this point to present to you is truth. And the truth is that our courts are corrupt, and that our elected officials are corrupt, and they're not representing the people. A few of them are, but if they actually got in there and got something done and started removing a lot of the restrictions on the American people, they would be removed. Sure, they can do a little bit. I mean, there's some of this that's a game, right? They let them do just enough to make them feel like they're making progress towards freedom, but at the end of the day, it's kind of just a little bit of a dog and pony show. So I think the government had something more planned, was the whole purpose of this video. I think they wanted something to happen in Nevada. I think that they continue to misunderstand who the Bundys are and who their supporters are. And they really, I think, believed something would happen when everybody was released in Nevada. And they really believed that potentially Ryan Payne would be setting something up on his way home to stage some type of a standoff. And I think they thought they'd be putting my life and my children's lives in jeopardy if they let us move forward with a plan to bring him home so he could turn himself in. So I guess that's it. I care about these people. They're good people. And I hope, if nothing else, that by giving them a voice from a different perspective and a different type of person that fits more of the everyday mold, I hope that it helps other people to start to see them differently. Because I know if I was sitting in jail and the courts and the media were lying about me, I would hope you guys would be out there saying, that's not who she is. She would not do that. She would not seek to bring harm to another individual. I hope that somebody would be speaking up for me. Maybe even protesting around the jail that I was sitting in. I think I'd appreciate that. Alright, so Ryan Payne's gonna need prayers. Jake Ryan needs prayers. Many of the protesters who went to Bunkerville and the refuge are the ones who were not incarcerated. Many of them are living in fear, and they feel like they have been forgotten. But the problem is, a lot of them are kind of in hiding too. So it's kind of a given that they'd be unknown. And it's really been breaking my heart lately, because they want to be known and they want their stories told, but they're afraid they'll be targeted and arrested, or they'll find a video of them with a gun and maybe they're a felon. And so it's kind of like living in their own little hell, where they have all this post-traumatic stress from going and thinking their government was going to kill them. Now they're out and nobody even knows their names, and they're afraid to bring up their names because they might go to jail. And yet they see all these other people being spoken of and called heroes and patriots, and you know, they protected the Bundys and the Hammonds, and they risked their lives, and all these names that we're raising money for, and letters and commissary, but some of them are living in their own little private hell prison at their homes. And so they're not getting mail at home that says, you know, hey, thank you for standing for the Hammonds. A lot of them have given up a lot, and even though they haven't been sitting in jail, they've been sitting in their own private jails at home. So I just want to put that out there and ask you that you'd be praying for them. See them as soldiers who went away to war and came back, and maybe they'd be like the soldiers who went away to war and they were on a secret mission, and so they come home suffering, and it's all top secret classified, so they can't even tell their family why they're suffering, but they're suffering. And maybe we could just start lifting them up in prayer, remembering that fighting for your countrymen and those who are being wrongfully incarcerated and abused is a worthy and a noble cause, and everybody's going to do it differently. But those who showed up to defend the Hammonds and the Bundys in Bunkerville, at the end of the day, they're veterans, they're heroes, they're patriots. And so anyway, now I'm just kind of rambling, but those are thoughts I've been thinking of with some of the prisoners. I've been learning about their stories. Some of the guys who pled out were threatened. They were told, you're never going to see your children again if you don't take this plea deal. You know, we can look at some who didn't plea out and see how strong they were, but some of the ones who pled out, they didn't know how to be strong. They weren't raised being strong, and then didn't have the community support. You know, not community as in us, but just a lot of them, we didn't even really know their names, and so we didn't even know how to be there for them. And a lot of them pled out really, really early on, and their whole thing was just over and done. But their lives are really difficult right now because they're lifelong felons. They can't vote, they can't have a gun, but even worse, they can't find places to live, they can't find jobs. It's much like the same way we treat our veterans. They come back from war and they're all screwed up. Well, these guys who pled out, a lot of them are all screwed up. They're lifelong felons. Every application they turn in for anything, it says, have you ever had a felony? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? And then the conspiracy to impede through threats, force, and intimidation is seen as a crime of violence. So you can't get into an apartment. A lot of jobs won't hire you. Everything in your life becomes more expensive. So if we could remember them too, I'm not going to put their names out there, but I know some of them are really struggling right now. And we think, well, they're out of jail, they should be able to be on their own. But some of them, I mean, some of these guys have been sleeping in their cars, and they don't know how to get help or how to reach out. And I don't know, it's a tremendous burden, and I am thankful for the community and those who've come alongside. There have been some flippin' amazing people that have stepped up and have joined us, and I'm so thankful for every one of you who has helped in any way, letters, calls, funds being sent to the family, showing up to court, whatever it is that you've done. I am grateful, and if you think you don't hear it enough, I'm going to tell you I am thankful for your help, and I'm thankful for your support. There's nothing that any of us can accomplish on our own. It only works because we've all worked together. So let's just keep exposing the crimes that are going on, keep loving our neighbors, keep trying to be principled, and show this tyrannical court system what it actually means to defend and protect. One last thing I'll leave you. On the way into court today, I passed 3 police officers. One was hiding behind some bushes in my town with his gun, his speeding traffic gun out, and pointing it at the people as they drove by. And I looked at him, and my first feeling wasn't, oh, there's one of those officers that defends and protects. I feel so safe that he's sitting there defending and protecting me. I pay him to be there. I feel so safe. That wasn't my first thought. My first thought was, I am so glad I wasn't going over the speed limit, because he would have pulled me over and he would have taken money from me. Even if I was harming nobody and I was driving responsibly and I was going 5 over or something. So anyway, the second officer I saw there was a car accident on the freeway on the bridge, and there was like 3 or 4 people involved. They were up front with the hood of this car open, trying to figure out how to get it to start. And the police officer was leaning on the roof of the car, filling out, I don't know, probably a ticket. Maybe it was just a traffic report, but I don't think so, because I don't think they do those on those little tablets. I think they do those in their car on the computer. So he had his little tablet out, and he was writing something on the top of his car, while the other 3 were up there trying to figure out how to get this car started. And I had to chuckle, because I thought, you know, he's writing traffic citations to whoever was responsible, and you know, more concerned about taking more money from them than he is trying to help these people get this car started. And then the third one, there was a man who was changing a tire on the side of the freeway, and about a block in front of him, there was a police officer sitting with his speed gun out. And I just had to chuckle over that too, because I thought, defend, protect, and serve. And here's a man on the side of the road, on the side of the freeway, trying to change this tire. And I could clearly see him from where this officer was at. And the officer was trying to catch people speeding to take money from them. Anyway, that's just a side note, something I saw today that, I don't know, as my brain starts to think a little more, I don't know, maybe like God wants us to think about helping our neighbor and forgiving, and I don't know, I start to look at things like this and I think, you know, officer, you're really not doing a very good job of defending and protecting right now. If you're extorting and harassing and kind of terrorizing people. I know when a police officer is driving behind me, I feel terrorized. I feel scared. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably do too. And you're watching your speed and you have your hands on the wheel and your heart's kind of racing and you're like, oh, please don't pull me over. I know you can find something to pull me over for, but please don't. That's no different than when you're in like a gang neighborhood and you see a bunch of gangbangers on the side of the corner and you're driving by them and you're like, oh, please don't come over to my car. Please don't hassle me. Just get me out of here. That's the feeling that I have when a police officer is behind me. Just get me out of here. Just get him off of my tail. I think he's going to take money from me. We just have a really big problem right now. And I hope people are waking up. And I'm not saying bad things about police officers. I'm saying that their jobs are to terrorize the public for the most part. And that bothers me. Because that's not loving your neighbor. And it's not defending and protecting. And so if I'm going to be kind to them, I'm going to be kind to them on the truth. I'm not going to be kind to them with a sense of worship and say, I'm so glad you're here defending me. I'm going to say, I'm going to be kind to you, but you know, you're kind of stealing from people and you're kind of harassing people. And I really wish you'd stop doing it. And the same with our courts. You know, if we say like, oh, you'll get justice in the courts because you'll get a jury trial. Like, come on. Can we at least, even if we're going to submit to the tyrants, can we at least say they're tyrants? Can we at least say that it's rigged in the courts and that you're really not going to find true justice? I mean, Daniel Sheese is presiding over the Las Vegas massacre now, and here we all thought like, oh, he's busted. You know, internal investigation happening. They're going to remove him from the Bundy trial and dismiss the case because of his misconduct. And Brady violations and firing Wooten and all of that, and here he's on another case already. So anyway, I guess I'll just leave you with it's not that we can't I don't know, it's not that we can't be sheep and be slaves, but can we at least like know that we're sheep and we're slaves? Can we at least know what's happening around us so that there isn't a sense of brainwashing going on? People can make their own choices, and you can submit in all the areas you want to submit, or not comply in the areas you don't want to comply. But let's at least be present in our minds and our bodies when this stuff's happening, and say that person is stealing money from me, or that person just took them hostage. If I did that to an individual, I would be charged with taking somebody, kidnapping them, holding them hostage, and then posting a ransom over their head for their family to get them out. Well, that's what our courts do right now. So let's just start acknowledging that and see if we can't spread this message of like, wake up. Like, let's just wake up. That's all I know to do right now, is just to ask people if we can just wake up, if we can realize that God's ways and our country's ways are not the same thing right now. And just because things are law doesn't make them right. Hitler didn't break any laws. Stalin didn't break any laws. They wrote into laws first their crimes, so when they committed them, they wouldn't be held accountable by the law. So if we go back to God's law, it makes it a lot easier to determine right from wrong and good from bad. So that's all. Sorry, it was kind of just a ranting video, but I had those thoughts I wanted to... Myri, yes. Did I say Sheese? Sorry. Thank you, Vincent. I see him as one and the same. Yes. Myri is presiding over the case, not Sheese, which is even worse. Myri was the lead prosecuting attorney. So wake up. Hashtag wake up. Let's just start to wake up a little bit and see if that doesn't help us to choose to engage a little bit more with the things going on around us, and start paying more attention to who we say is the official and the authority, and start to hold them to a higher standard of God's law, and stop just accepting man's law. Man's law says you can murder a baby as long as you do it inside the womb and not outside the womb. You know, like you can cut its spinal cord, and as long as it dies before the mom delivers it, it's not murder. These are not God's standards. This is not going to pass God's test as far as saying, like, will you bless our country? But if we just say, well, we follow the law and the law said it was okay. The law is wrong. The law is wrong. And today, Judge Brown was wrong. And she's a tyrant. And so let's wake up. #wake up. All right, guys. God bless you.